when retired mechanic Agnes May noticed a jet engine threatening her Texas town. Nobody thought her experience could fix it, but one catastrophic failure was about to change everything, putting her skills to the ultimate test as the whole town watched, not knowing whether her knowledge would save them or disaster was inevitable. Stay tuned and tell us where you're watching from, and if this story inspires you, make sure to subscribe because I've got something even more special coming up tomorrow. When Colonel Roger Thunder Ford made a bet he was certain he'd win, 8-year-old Taylor Ace Butler stood outside his office clutching her dead father's flight manuals, demanding something that had never been granted in military history. What started as a simple wager, 1 week of impossible flight training to prove the wisdom of age restrictions, spiraled into a base-wide phenomenon that drew Pentagon officials, skeptical pilots, and national media attention. Nobody expected the grieving child to survive day one of modified aviation training, let alone master complex aircraft systems, execute precision maneuvers, or ultimately attempt what seasoned pilots called suicide, landing a real fighter jet with techniques that defied every safety protocol, while an entire Air Force base watched in stunned silence, knowing they were witnessing either the birth of a legend or an unthinkable tragedy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Colonel Roger Ford's pre-dawn routine had become sacred over his 28 years of military service. Every day at 530 hours, he completed a 5-mile run through Silver Valley's desert terrain, showered in exactly 12 minutes, and arrived at his Thunderbolt Air Force Base office by 6:30 to review overnight intelligence reports. The Nevada sun was just beginning to paint the eastern mountains orange when he rounded the corner of the administration building, his breath visible in the crisp September air. The small figure standing ramrod straight beside his office door stopped him cold. At first glance, Ford assumed one of his personnel had brought their child to work early, though the oversized flight suit and rigid military posture seemed unusual for a casual visit. As he approached, details became clearer. The child wore Master Sergeant Neil Butler's name tape. Ford recognized it immediately, having signed the posthumous commendation letters 8 months earlier. "Can I help you?" Ford asked, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. The girl turned with precision that would have impressed a drill instructor. Her salute was textbook perfect, though her small hand barely reached the brim of an adult-sized flight cap. "Colonel Ford, sir, I'm Taylor Butler, requesting permission to speak with you about official Air Force business." Ford's eyebrows rose. Most 8-year-olds on base addressed him as Mr. or avoided him entirely. This one used proper military protocol with confidence that suggested extensive coaching. He returned her salute, noting how she held the position until properly acknowledged. "At ease, Taylor, what brings you here so early?" She shifted to parade rest, hands clasped behind her back. "Chin up, sir, I'm here to request admission to the Youth Aviation Excellence Program. I have my application, medical clearance, and supporting documentation." Ford accepted the manila folder. She extended, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. The Youth Aviation Excellence Program was Thunderbolt's elite training initiative for military dependents aged 12 to 17, designed to prepare exceptional candidates for eventual Air Force Academy admission. No one Taylor's age had ever applied, let alone been considered. "Taylor, the minimum age for this program is 12. That's not negotiable. It's based on physical development, emotional maturity, and safety requirements. Sir, with respect, I believe individual assessment should determine readiness rather than arbitrary age limits." Her response was delivered with the same precision as her salute. "My father always said the Air Force values performance over demographics." The reference to Neil Butler created a complex knot in Ford's chest. Master Sergeant Butler had been one of Thunderbolt's finest, a maintenance chief whose innovations had saved the Air Force millions while ensuring pilot safety. His death in a training accident had devastated the entire base community. Ford opened the folder, finding documentation that demonstrated remarkable preparation. Taylor's application was typed with military precision, each section completed thoroughly. Her physical fitness scores from a civilian gym exceeded those of many teenage applicants. Most impressively, she had somehow obtained ground school completion certificates that typically required months of intensive study. "Where did you learn aircraft systems theory?" Ford asked, scanning technical evaluations that seemed impossible for someone her age. "Dad started teaching me when I was 6, after he died. I kept studying his manuals and taking online courses. Chief Hunter has been helping me understand the practical applications." Stan Hunter was Thunderbolt's senior maintenance chief, Neil Butler's former supervisor and closest friend. Ford made a mental note to have a serious conversation with the Chief Master Sergeant about appropriate boundaries with grieving families. "Taylor, I understand you want to honor your father's memory, but this program involves real aircraft, complex procedures, and physical demands that, sir, permission to demonstrate my qualifications?" Taylor interrupted, then immediately caught herself. "Sorry for interrupting, sir. May I please show you what I've learned? Ford studied the child before him, recognizing something familiar in her bearing. The stubborn determination, the refusal to accept conventional limitations, the quiet confidence that suggested extensive preparation rather than childish bravado. He had seen the same qualities in exceptional pilots throughout his career. What kind of demonstration are you proposing? Flight simulator evaluation, written examination on aircraft systems, and physical fitness assessment using age-adjusted standards. Taylor's response came without hesitation. If I can't meet modified performance criteria, I'll accept your decision and wait until I'm 12. The proposal was reasonable, though Ford suspected Taylor had calculated her chances carefully before making this request. Still, the minimum age requirement existed for legitimate reasons that no amount of preparation could overcome. Captain Courtney Hunter emerged from the pilot-ready room, her flight suit crisp and her helmet bag slung over one shoulder. As Thunderbolt's chief flight instructor and Stan Hunter's daughter, she knew the Butler family situation intimately. Her expression suggested she had been expecting this encounter. "Colonel, good morning." "Taylor, you're up early, ma'am. I'm requesting admission to the youth aviation program." Taylor replied formally. Courtney's expression shifted to concern. "Taylor, we've talked about this. The program has age requirements for good reasons, but you also said the Air Force values merit over demographics. When national security requires exceptional performance," Taylor countered, "this isn't about special treatment. It's about proving I can meet the standards." Ford found himself caught between military regulation and the undeniable evidence of Taylor's preparation. Her documentation suggested capabilities that exceeded those of typical teenage applicants, but her age created liability issues that could end his career if something went wrong. "Captain Hunter, what's your professional assessment of Taylor's theoretical knowledge?" Courtney hesitated before responding. "Her understanding of aircraft systems is remarkably advanced. She's been studying with my father for months, and her grasp of aerodynamics exceeds some pilot candidates. But knowledge and capability aren't the same thing, especially in high-stress situations." "I understand the risks," Taylor said quietly, "but my dad died because someone made a mistake doing routine maintenance. If I'm going to be an Air Force pilot someday, I need to understand every system completely. Waiting 4 years won't make me more committed or better prepared." The logic was sound, though Ford recognized the emotional reasoning behind it. Taylor was processing grief through pursuit of excellence, channeling loss into purpose. It was admirable, but potentially dangerous if it clouded her judgment about genuine limitations. "Taylor, even if I were inclined to consider your request, the program involves flight time and actual aircraft. Our insurance policies specifically exclude participants under 12. Sir, I've researched military protocols for exceptional circumstances. Regulation 362,020 allows base commanders to grant waivers for individuals who demonstrate extraordinary readiness, provided appropriate safety measures are implemented." Ford's surprise must have shown on his face. Few active duty personnel knew about the exceptional circumstances regulation, let alone an 8-year-old civilian dependent. Taylor had clearly researched this request with military thoroughness. Lieutenant Dustin Boyd approached from the flight line, his young pilot swagger evident even at distance. At 26, he represented the new generation of Air Force aviators, technically proficient, but sometimes lacking the wisdom that came with experience. His expression suggested skepticism about the unusual gathering outside Ford's office. "Colonel, is there a problem here?" Boyd asked, his tone carrying barely concealed condescension toward Taylor. "Lieutenant Boyd, meet Taylor Butler. She's requesting admission to the youth aviation program." Boyd's laugh was immediate and dismissive. "Sir, she looks like she should be in elementary school, not flight training. Are we really entertaining this?" Taylor's jaw tightened, but she maintained military bearing despite the obvious disrespect. Ford noted her emotional control. Most children would have responded angrily to Boyd's attitude. "Lieutenant Taylor has demonstrated remarkable preparation and knowledge. Her request deserves serious consideration." "With respect, sir, knowledge isn't the same as capability. Flying requires split-second decisions, physical coordination, and emotional stability under pressure. Those qualities develop with maturity." "You're absolutely right," Taylor said, addressing Boyd directly, "which is why I'm requesting evaluation rather than automatic acceptance. Let my performance speak for itself." Boyd's expression shifted to surprise at her composed response. He had clearly expected defensiveness or tears, not professional engagement with his criticism. Ford found himself making an impulsive decision that would have far-reaching consequences. The combination of Taylor's preparation, her family's sacrifice, and his own curiosity about human potential created a moment of institutional courage. "Taylor, I'm going to make you an offer. 1 week of modified training and evaluation. If you can demonstrate that you're capable of meeting age-adjusted standards while maintaining safety protocols, I'll personally review your application for the regular program." Taylor's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her military composure. "Sir, are you serious?" dead serious. But the standards will be rigorous, the evaluation will be comprehensive. And if you can't perform safely, the experiment ends immediately. No arguments, no appeals. I understand, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. Boyd stepped forward, his expression troubled. Colonel, with respect, this seems like an unnecessary risk. If something happens to her, we'll all be held responsible. Lieutenant, the Air Force has always been about pushing boundaries and testing assumptions. Sometimes that requires courage to try something unprecedented. Ford extended his hand to Taylor, who shook it with surprising firmness. Report to Captain Hunter at 8 tomorrow. She'll design your evaluation program and safety protocols. As Taylor gathered her documentation and prepared to leave, Ford realized he had just committed himself to something that would either validate his judgment or destroy his career. The 8-year-old, walking away with renewed purpose, carried the hopes of her family and the skepticism of his command. Sir, Boyd said quietly after Taylor was out of earshot. I hope you know what you're doing. Ford watched the small figure disappear around the corner of the building, still moving with that precise military bearing that seemed incongruous on someone so young. Lieutenant, sometimes the best decisions are the ones that scare you the most. The Nevada sun climbed higher, beginning what would prove to be the most unusual week in Thunderbolt Air Force Base's history. Ford had no idea that his spontaneous decision would soon attract attention from the Pentagon, challenge fundamental assumptions about human potential, and force everyone involved to reconsider what they thought they knew about courage, capability, and the true meaning of military excellence. The bet had been made. Now they would all discover whether an 8-year-old girl could prove that excellence recognized no boundaries, or whether some limitations existed for reasons that no amount of determination could overcome. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. News of Colonel Ford's unprecedented decision spread through Thunderbolt Air Force Base faster than afterburner ignition. By 1-800 hours, barely 12 hours after Taylor Butler's formal request, every mess hall conversation centered on the 8-year-old who had somehow convinced the base commander to let her attempt pilot training. Opinions ranged from admiration to outright hostility, with most personnel falling somewhere between curiosity and concern. Chief Master Sergeant Stan Hunter sat in his cluttered maintenance office, surrounded by technical manuals and coffee-stained reports, trying to process his role in the unfolding situation. For 6 months, he had been quietly helping Taylor understand aircraft systems, initially as grief counseling for Neil Butler's daughter. What had started as simple explanations of hydraulic principles had evolved into comprehensive technical education that now threatened to thrust him into the spotlight. His daughter Courtney appeared in the doorway, still wearing her flight suit from afternoon training missions. Her expression carried the weight of someone who had just accepted enormous responsibility. Dad, we need to talk about tomorrow's evaluation program. Stan gestured to the chair across from his desk, noting the tension in Courtney's shoulders. As Thunderbolt's chief flight instructor, she faced the impossible task of designing training protocols for someone whose age and size created safety challenges that no manual addressed. Tell me you have a plan that won't get us all court, marshaled Stan said, attempting humor that fell flat in the current circumstances. I've been working with Dr. Ford on psychological assessment criteria and Captain Lane on safety modifications. The problem isn't creating age-appropriate standards, it's managing the political pressure this is going to generate. Courtney spread a folder of documents across Stan's desk, revealing weeks of preparation that suggested Taylor's request hadn't been as spontaneous as it appeared. Flight simulator schedules, modified physical fitness requirements, and detailed safety protocols filled multiple pages of careful planning. How long has Taylor been preparing for this specifically? Stan asked, scanning the documentation. Since March, she's been using the base library's computer terminals to research everything from Air Force regulations to child development studies. This wasn't a sudden decision, it was a calculated campaign. The revelation impressed Stan despite his concerns about the situation's complexity. Taylor had approached her goal with the same systematic methodology that had made her father exceptional at his job. The preparation suggested genuine commitment rather than impulsive grief response. Across the base at the officers' club, Lieutenant Boyd nursed a beer while fielding questions from fellow pilots about the day's unusual events. The informal gathering had become an impromptu debate about military standards, age requirements, and the wisdom of Colonel Ford's decision. It's a publicity stunt, declared Captain Wade Lane, the base's chief test pilot. Ford's trying to generate positive media coverage after the budget cuts last quarter. Boyd shook his head, remembering Taylor's composed response to his skepticism. I don't think so. The kid seemed genuinely prepared. She knew regulations I've never heard of. Preparation doesn't equal capability, Captain Lane countered. Flying requires physical coordination, spatial awareness, and decision-making under pressure. Those abilities develop with neural maturity. not study habits. The conversation attracted Sergeant First Class Rhonda Pierce, whose drill instructor experience had exposed her to exceptional young people before. Her perspective carried weight among the assembled personnel. I've seen 12-year-olds who couldn't handle basic military bearing and 16-year-olds who demonstrated leadership that impressed seasoned sergeants. Pierce observed, age is a guideline, not an absolute predictor of capability. But guidelines exist for reasons. Quote, Captain Lane insisted. Insurance policies, safety regulations, developmental psychology. These aren't arbitrary restrictions. Boyd found himself defending Taylor despite his initial skepticism. Maybe, but what if we're limiting potential based on assumptions rather than evidence? The Air Force has always been about pushing boundaries. The debate continued as base personnel processed the implications of Ford's decision. Some viewed it as dangerous precedent setting that could compromise military standards. Others saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate institutional flexibility and commitment to merit-based evaluation. In the base hospital wing, Dr. Carolyn Ford reviewed Taylor's medical records while considering the psychological assessment she would need to conduct. As Colonel Ford's wife and the BAS's senior psychologist, she faced potential conflicts of interest that complicated her professional obligations. Taylor's medical history revealed no significant concerns, typical childhood injuries, current vaccinations, and physical development within normal parameters for her age. More interesting were these psychological evaluation notes from the months following her father's death, which documented remarkable emotional resilience and healthy grief processing. Dr. Ford's intercom buzzed with a call from her husband, whose voice carried the stress of someone questioning a major decision. Caroline, I need your honest, professional assessment of Taylor Butler's emotional readiness for what I've committed her to. Roger, you know, I can't discuss specific cases, even with you, but I can say that grief can motivate exceptional performance while also creating vulnerability to additional trauma. Translation, this could help her or destroy her, and we won't know which until it's too late. Dr. Ford considered her response carefully, balancing professional ethics with personal concern for both Taylor and her husband's career. I can say that some children thrive when given challenges that match their preparation and motivation. The key is ensuring support systems and safety nets. Meanwhile, in the modest off-base housing where the Butler family lived, Taylor sat at her father's old desk, surrounded by flight manuals and technical diagrams. Her mother, Valerie, watched from the kitchen doorway, torn between pride in her daughter's determination and fear about the risks she was about to face. Sweetheart, were you sure about this? Colonel Ford gave you an opportunity, but that doesn't mean you have to take it. Taylor looked up from calculations she was reviewing, her expression serious but not troubled. Mom, this is what Dad would want me to do, he always said. Butler, women don't back down from challenges that matter. Valerie approached and sat beside her daughter, studying the technical material that covered every available surface. The complexity was overwhelming, yet Taylor navigated it with confidence that suggested genuine comprehension rather than rote memorization. What if you can't meet their standards? What if it's too difficult or dangerous? Then I'll have tried my best and learned something valuable. But Mom, what if I can do it? What if Dad's training was good enough to get me started? The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Valerie opened it to find Airman First Class Cody Lane, a young maintenance technician whose nervous expression suggested official business. Ma'am, Colonel Ford sent me to deliver this. He handed Valerie a sealed envelope marked with official Air Force letterhead. Taylor joined them at the door, accepting the envelope with steady hands despite its obvious importance. Inside, she found detailed schedules, safety protocols, and equipment requirements for the week ahead. The documentation was comprehensive, suggesting that base personnel had worked late into the evening preparing for her evaluation. Report to Hangar 7 at 80 hours, Taylor read aloud. Wear appropriate civilian clothing for equipment fitting. Bring photo identification and emergency contact information. The official language made everything suddenly real. Tomorrow, Taylor would begin something unprecedented in Air Force history, facing challenges that would test not only her capabilities, but also the institution's willingness to recognize exceptional potential regardless of conventional limitations. Cody Lane shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to say something beyond his official message. Miss Butler, my dad flies test aircraft here, he says. What you're attempting is either really brave or really crazy. What do you think? Taylor asked directly. The young airman considered his response carefully. I think brave and crazy aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes the best pilots have a little of both. After Cody left, Taylor and Valerie spent the evening reviewing the week's schedule and discussing contingency plans. The conversation was practical rather than emotional, focusing on logistics and safety protocols rather than fears and uncertainties. Are you scared? Valerie asked as they prepared for bed. Taylor thought for a moment before answering. I'm nervous about disappointing people who are taking risks to help me, but I'm not scared of the flying part. Dad taught me that fear is just information about things we need to prepare for. Across town in his base quarters, Colonel Ford reviewed reports from his staff about the day's developments. The attention Taylor's situation was generating had already reached higher command levels, with calls from Pentagon personnel requesting information about the child pilot experiment. His aide, Airman First Class Cody Lane, delivered a folder of messages that had accumulated throughout the evening. Media requests, concerned parent inquiries, and official queries from other base commanders filled several pages of documentation. "Sir, there's also this," Cody said, handing forward a handwritten note from General Joyce Lane at the Pentagon. The brief message requested a full report on the situation and suggested that senior leadership was monitoring developments closely. Ford realized that Taylor's evaluation week had already become much larger than he had anticipated. Success would validate his judgment and potentially influence Air Force policy regarding exceptional circumstances. Failure could damage careers and reinforce arguments against institutional flexibility. Dr. Ford appeared in his office doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested serious conversation. The psychological profiles came back on Taylor. She's processing grief in remarkably healthy ways, but she's also carrying enormous pressure to honor her father's memory. Success could provide healing, but failure could create lasting trauma, so we make sure she succeeds, Ford replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Roger, we can't guarantee success. We can only provide appropriate support and maintain safety standards. The rest depends on factors beyond our control. Ford reviewed the schedule Courtney Hunter had developed, noting the careful progression from basic evaluations to increasingly complex challenges. Each day would test different aspects of Taylor's readiness while building confidence and skills incrementally. What if she's not ready? What if we're setting her up for devastating failure? Dr. Ford considered the question that went to the heart of their dilemma. What if she is ready? What if we're about to discover that our assumptions about human potential have been limiting rather than protecting? The conversation was interrupted by Captain Hunter's arrival with final preparations for tomorrow's evaluation. Her expression carried the focused intensity of someone accepting significant responsibility. "Colonel, we're ready. Safety protocols are in place. Medical personnel are on standby. And evaluation criteria are clearly defined. If Taylor Butler wants to prove herself, she'll have every opportunity to do so safely." Ford looked at the documentation that would govern the most unusual week in Thunderbolt's history. Tomorrow, an 8-year-old girl would begin attempting something that challenged fundamental assumptions about age, capability, and the nature of military excellence. "Captain, I hope we're about to witness something remarkable rather than create something we'll all regret." "Sir, either way, we're about to learn something important about the limits of human potential." As base personnel completed their evening routines, speculation continued about what the next week would bring. Taylor Butler had already accomplished something unprecedented simply by convincing Colonel Ford to give her an opportunity. Now, she would have to prove that preparation, determination, and inherited passion could overcome barriers that had never been successfully challenged. The stage was set for a test that would influence not only Taylor's future, but potentially reshape Air Force policies regarding exceptional circumstances and individual merit valuation. Success would open doors that could never be closed again. Failure would reinforce existing limitations and serve as cautionary tale about the dangers of challenging institutional wisdom. Tomorrow would begin the process of determining which outcome awaited everyone involved in the most unprecedented experiment in military aviation training history. Dawn broke over the Nevada desert with crystal and clarity, casting long shadows across Thunderbolt Air Force Base as Taylor Butler walked through the main gate at 7:45 hours. She wore civilian clothes as instructed, dark jeans, sneakers, and a plain blue t-shirt that made her look even younger than her 8 years. In her backpack, she carried the required documentation along with a small notebook where she had recorded questions about procedures she wanted to understand better. Hangar 7 loomed ahead like a metallic cathedral, its massive doors already opened to reveal the silhouettes of training aircraft. The 38 Talons appeared sleek and predatory in the early light, their white paint schemes gleaming under the fluorescent hangar lights. Taylor had studied these aircraft extensively in technical manuals, but seeing them up close created a mixture of excitement and intimidation that no amount of book learning could have prepared her for. Captain Hunter waited near the hangar entrance, clipboard in hand, an expression professionally neutral. Beside her stood a woman Taylor didn't recognize, tall, austere, and wearing the insignia of a Pentagon inspector. The stranger's presence immediately elevated the stakes of what Taylor had assumed would be a relatively private evaluation. "Taylor, good morning. This is General Joyce Lane from Air Force Personnel Command. She's here to observe our evaluation protocols." General Lane extended her hand with military formality, studying Taylor with eyes that missed nothing. At 58, she had built her career on identifying exceptional potential while maintaining institutional standards. Her presence suggested that Taylor's situation had attracted attention at the highest levels of Air Force leadership. Miss Butler, I understand you believe you're ready for advanced aviation training. Yes, ma'am. I've prepared extensively and I'm confident I can meet appropriate standards. We'll see, General Lane replied, her tone suggesting skeptical curiosity rather than encouragement. Inside the hangar, Taylor discovered that the evaluation would involve more personnel than she had anticipated. Dr. Ford waited near a medical station. Sergeant Pierce stood beside physical fitness equipment and several technicians prepared monitoring devices whose purposes weren't immediately clear. The scope of preparation suggested this was being treated as a significant event rather than a simple accommodation. First order of business is equipment fitting, Captain Hunter announced, leading Taylor toward a collection of flight gear arranged on tables. Everything needs to be properly sized and adjusted for safety. The process proved more complex than Taylor had expected. Standard flight suits were designed for adult proportions, requiring extensive alterations to achieve proper fit. The helmet sizing was particularly challenging as Taylor's head was smaller than any standard configuration the Air Force typically accommodated. Chief Hunter emerged from the equipment room carrying specialized gear that looked different from the standard issue items Taylor had seen in photographs. His expression was serious but encouraging as he began explaining the modifications. We've had to adapt some equipment specifically for your size. The ejection seat has been completely reconfigured and the harness system required custom modifications. These aren't standard items, so everything needs careful inspection before use. The technical complexity of adapting military equipment for someone Taylor's size impressed General Lane, who took detailed notes about the process. Her questions to the technicians revealed deep understanding of aviation safety systems and genuine concern about maintaining protection standards. How do these modifications affect ejection sequence timing? General Lane asked Chief Hunter. We've run computer simulations with weight and height variables adjusted for Taylor's measurements. The safety margins remain within acceptable parameters, though obviously this is outside normal operational envelope. Taylor listened to the technical discussion with fascination rather than anxiety. The complexity of safety considerations reinforced her understanding that this opportunity involved real risks that base personnel were managing carefully. Their thoroughness demonstrated respect for her safety rather than casual treatment of potential dangers. Sergeant Pierce approached with physical fitness evaluation equipment as Taylor completed equipment fitting. The modified flight suit fit reasonably well, though the bulky survival gear made movement slightly awkward. Taylor walked carefully, adjusting to the weight distribution and restricted mobility that pilots accepted as necessary safety equipment. Physical assessment first. PIES announced we need baseline measurements for comparison with ongoing performance throughout the week. The fitness evaluation revealed capabilities that impressed the observing personnel despite their attempts to maintain professional objectivity. Taylor's cardiovascular conditioning exceeded expectations, her flexibility was remarkable, and her coordination during complex movement tasks suggested natural kinesthetic intelligence. Where did you develop this level of physical conditioning? Dr. Ford asked. Recording data that would be crucial for psychological evaluation. I've been training specifically for 6 months. But Dad started teaching me about physical preparation when I was 5. He said pilots needed to be athletes as much as technicians. General Lane observed Taylor's performance while conducting quiet conversations with base personnel about the implications of what they were witnessing. Her expression suggested she was processing information that challenged preconceptions about age and capability relationships. Captain Hunter introduced the next evaluation phase with equipment that captured Taylor's complete attention. A computer terminal displayed aircraft systems diagrams, technical specifications, and operational procedures that would test her theoretical knowledge comprehensively. This examination covers everything from basic aerodynamics to emergency procedures. You'll have 90 minutes to complete all sections. Taylor approached the terminal with confidence born of months of intensive study. The questions progressed from fundamental principles to complex scenarios that would challenge experienced pilots. She worked steadily, pausing occasionally to consider difficult problems, but demonstrating consistent understanding across diverse technical areas. General Lane observed over Taylor's shoulder, noting the systematic approach she used to analyze problems and the accuracy of her responses to questions that many adult candidates struggled with. The demonstration of knowledge was impressive, but the general remained focused on whether theoretical understanding would translate to practical capability. Remarkable preparation, General Lane murmured to Captain Hunter, but knowledge and performance are different animals entirely. After 90 minutes, Taylor submitted her examination with quiet confidence. The computer scoring revealed results that created murmurs of surprise among the observing personnel. She had achieved 94.0% accuracy on material that typically challenged candidates with significantly more education and experience. Outstanding work, Captain Hunter acknowledged. Now we move to practical evaluation. The flight simulator occupied an entire section of Hangar 7, It's sophisticated technology capable of replicating flight conditions with remarkable accuracy. Taylor had used basic simulators before, but this system was designed for advanced pilot training and represented a quantum leap in complexity. Lieutenant Boyd appeared as Taylor prepared for simulator evaluation, his expression suggesting continued skepticism despite the impressive academic performance. His presence reminded everyone that not all base personnel supported the experiment they were conducting. "Colonel Ford asked me to observe the practical evaluation," Boyd announced. "I'm curious to see how theoretical knowledge translates to actual flight performance." Taylor noticed the subtle tension his arrival created, but maintained focus on the task ahead. The simulator cockpit required significant adjustment to accommodate her size, with technicians modifying seat position, control placement, and instrument visibility to ensure she could operate all systems safely. "The scenario begins with basic aircraft familiarization," Captain Hunter explained as Taylor settled into the simulator. "You'll progress through startup procedures, taxi operations, and eventually basic flight maneuvers." The complexity of the simulator's controls initially overwhelmed Taylor. Despite her theoretical preparation, managing multiple instruments, radio communications, and flight controls simultaneously required coordination that exceeded anything her studies had prepared her for. Her first attempts were awkward, with several errors that would have been dangerous in actual flight conditions. "This is exactly what I expected," Boyd observed quietly. "Knowledge doesn't equal capability. She's not ready for this level of complexity." However, Taylor's performance improved rapidly as she adapted to the simulator's demands. Her systematic approach to problem-solving compensated for initial coordination difficulties, and her theoretical understanding provided framework for integrating multiple information sources effectively. General Lane noted Taylor's learning curve with professional interest. "She's processing information and adapting quickly. That's not typical for most candidates, regardless of age." After 2 hours of simulator work, Taylor had progressed through basic procedures to elementary flight maneuvers. Her performance wasn't flawless, but it demonstrated genuine aptitude for aviation that impressed even skeptical observers. The combination of preparation, natural ability, and adaptability suggested potential that transcended edge-based limitations. "Adequate performance for initial evaluation," Captain Hunter announced diplomatically. "Tomorrow we'll assess more advanced capabilities." As the evaluation concluded, Taylor felt exhausted but satisfied with her performance. The physical and mental demands had been greater than anticipated, but she had demonstrated competency across multiple assessment areas. The respectful treatment from base personnel indicated that she was being taken seriously rather than patronized. General Lane approached Taylor as she changed out of flight gear, her expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. "Miss Butler, today's performance was impressive. You've demonstrated preparation and aptitude that exceed my expectations. However, the real challenges lie ahead. Are you prepared for increased difficulty and pressure?" "Yes, ma'am. Today showed me what I need to work on, but it also proved that I can learn what I need to know. We'll see." Tomorrow's evaluation will test capabilities that separate potential pilots from actual pilots. As Taylor gathered her belongings and prepared to leave, she overheard fragments of conversation between the evaluating personnel. The discussions revealed divided opinions about her readiness and the appropriateness of the experiment itself. "Impressive cognitive abilities, but aviation requires more than intelligence," Dr. Ford observed to Captain Hunter. "True, but she's demonstrated more natural aptitude than many teenage candidates," Captain Hunter replied. "The question is whether that aptitude can develop safely at her age." Lieutenant Boyd remained skeptical despite Taylor's strong performance. "One good day doesn't prove anything. Real flying involves split-second decisions under pressure that could kill you. Book learning doesn't prepare you for that reality." Taylor walked toward the hangar exit. Processing the day's experiences and preparing mentally for tomorrow's challenges, she had proven her theoretical knowledge and demonstrated basic aptitude. But she understood that more difficult tests awaited. The presence of General Lane indicated that her performance was being evaluated at levels far beyond Thunderbolt Air Force Base. Colonel Ford waited outside the hangar, his expression reflecting the complex pressures he faced as architect of this unprecedented experiment. Taylor's strong initial performance validated his decision to some degree, but he understood that success or failure would ultimately depend on challenges yet to come. "How did it go today?" he asked. "Good, sir. I learned a lot and proved I can handle basic requirements. Tomorrow will be harder, but I'm ready for it." Ford noted Taylor's confident, but not overconfident assessment of her performance. She was processing feedback constructively and maintaining realistic expectations about future challenges. "Taylor, you should know that your evaluation is attracting attention beyond our base. People at very high levels are watching to see what you accomplish." "I understand, sir. I won't disappoint you or the Air Force." As Taylor walked toward the base exit where her mother waited, she reflected on a day that had exceeded her expectations in both difficulty and satisfaction. She had proven herself capable of meeting initial standards, but she also understood that the real tests of her readiness lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges designed to evaluate capabilities that distinguish successful pilots from knowledgeable enthusiasts. The stakes were rising, and Taylor would need every bit of preparation, natural ability, and determination to continue proving that exceptional potential could overcome conventional limitations. Tuesday arrived with unseasonable cloud cover that cast the Nevada desert in muted grays, matching the somber mood that had settled over portions of Thunderbolt Air Force Base. Anonymous complaints had been filed overnight with the Inspector General's office, questioning Colonel Ford's judgment and demanding immediate termination of what critics called a dangerous publicity stunt masquerading as military training. Taylor entered Hangar 7 to find significantly more personnel than the previous day. Colonel Stephanie Boyd, the base's Judge Advocate General, stood near a table covered with legal documents, her presence indicating that liability concerns had escalated beyond routine risk management. Beside her, a stern-faced man in civilian clothes took photographs of equipment modifications and safety protocols. "Taylor, good morning," Captain Hunter greeted her, though tension lines around her eyes suggested the night had brought complications. "We have some additional observers today, but your evaluation schedule remains unchanged." General Lane positioned herself where she could monitor both Taylor's performance and the documentation being compiled by the legal team. Her expression revealed nothing, but her meticulous note-taking suggested that every aspect of the day's activities would be scrutinized at the highest levels of Air Force Command. The civilian photographer approached Taylor with professional detachment. "Miss Butler, I'm documenting safety procedures for official review. Please continue your normal preparations and ignore my presence." Taylor nodded politely while processing the implications of increased oversight. The legal and media attention suggested that yesterday's success had raised stakes rather than validating her readiness. Each subsequent performance would carry greater weight in determining not only her future, but potentially the careers of everyone supporting her evaluation. Dr. Ford conducted a brief psychological assessment before training commenced, her questions designed to evaluate Taylor's emotional state under increased pressure. The examination revealed composure that impressed the observing personnel, though Dr. Ford noted subtle signs of stress that warranted continued monitoring. "How are you feeling about the additional attention your evaluation is receiving?" Dr. Ford asked. "It's a little overwhelming, but I understand why people want to make sure this is done safely. I just want to focus on proving I can meet the standards." The mature response demonstrated emotional intelligence that belied Taylor's chronological age, though Dr. Ford remained alert for signs that pressure might compromise performance or psychological well-being in future evaluations. Today's assessment began with advanced simulator scenarios designed to test decision-making under stress. The situations progressed beyond basic flight operations to emergency procedures that would challenge experienced pilots. Captain Hunter had carefully selected scenarios that would evaluate Taylor's judgment rather than simply testing memorized responses. Engine failure during takeoff, Captain Hunter announced as Taylor settled into the simulator cockpit. "Execute appropriate emergency procedures." The scenario unfolded with realistic complexity that demanded immediate analysis and decisive action. Taylor's theoretical knowledge provided the foundation for understanding her options, but implementing solutions under time pressure required capabilities that couldn't be taught through study alone. Her initial response was hesitant as she processed multiple instrument readings and prioritized actions according to emergency checklists. The simulator's realistic audio and visual cues created stress that tested her ability to maintain focus while managing competing demands on her attention. Lieutenant Boyd observed from the control station his expression, suggesting continued skepticism about Taylor's readiness for advanced challenges. "She's thinking too much and reacting too slowly. Real emergencies don't provide time for extended analysis." However, Taylor's performance improved as she adapted to the scenario's demands. Her systematic approach compensated for initial hesitation, and her execution of emergency procedures demonstrated understanding of principles rather than rote memorization of steps. Landing gear malfunction during approach, Captain Hunter introduced the next emergency scenario. Determine appropriate course of action. This situation required evaluation of multiple options with different risk profiles, testing Taylor's judgment about acceptable compromises between safety and mission completion. Her analysis was methodical, weighing factors that included fuel state, weather conditions, and available runway length. General Lane noted Taylor's decision-making process with professional interest. "She's considering variables that many adult candidates overlook. The cognitive approach is sophisticated." Taylor's execution of the emergency landing procedure demonstrated coordination between theoretical knowledge and practical application. While her performance wasn't flawless, it revealed aptitude for aviation that transcended edge-based expectations. The morning's simulator work concluded with Taylor having successfully managed 4 different emergency scenarios. each designed to evaluate specific aspects of pilot judgment and capability. Her performance had been consistently competent, though observers noted areas where additional training would be necessary. Satisfactory performance on emergency procedures. Captain Hunter announced diplomatically, "This afternoon will begin introduction to actual aircraft systems." The transition to real aircraft represented a significant escalation in both complexity and risk. The 38 Talon assigned for Taylor's evaluation had been extensively modified with additional safety systems and monitoring equipment that would allow real-time assessment of her capabilities. Chief Hunter supervised the aircraft preparation with meticulous attention to detail that reflected the extraordinary nature of what they were attempting. Every system had been inspected multiple times and backup safety measures exceeded standard requirements by significant margins. The aircraft is configured for dual instruction with override capabilities for the safety pilot. Chief Hunter explained to the legal observers, "Miss Butler will have access to primary controls, but Captain Hunter can intervene immediately if necessary." Colonel Boyd reviewed safety documentation with the thoroughness that legal liability required, her questions revealing deep understanding of both aviation procedures and institutional risk management. Her presence served as a reminder that Taylor's evaluation occurred within broader context of military regulations and public accountability. What specific criteria determine when intervention becomes necessary? Colonel Boyd asked Captain Hunter. Any deviation from prescribed parameters, any indication of spatial disorientation, or any situation where safety margins are approached. Taylor observed these discussions while conducting pre-flight inspection of the 38 using checklists her father had taught her years earlier. The aircraft's sleek lines and powerful configuration created excitement tempered by respect for the complex systems she was preparing to operate. The photographer documented every aspect of Taylor's interaction with the aircraft, creating a visual record that would either validate the Air Force's commitment to merit-based evaluation or serve as evidence of institutional failure if something went wrong. Airman Cody Lane approached as Taylor completed her external inspection, his expression carrying news that would complicate an already tense situation. "Ma'am, there's been a development. Representative Williams from the House Armed Services Committee is demanding immediate briefing on this situation. His office called the Pentagon an hour ago." General Lane's expression darkened at news of congressional attention. Understanding that political involvement would transform Taylor's evaluation from internal Air Force matter to public spectacle with national implications. "What's the representative's specific concern?" General Lane asked. "Child endangerment, inappropriate use of military resources, and potential violation of federal safety regulations," Cody replied, reading from notes he had taken during the phone conversation. The legal complications threatened to overshadow Taylor's performance, potentially ending her evaluation based on political considerations rather than demonstrated capability. Colonel Ford would soon face pressure to terminate the experiment, regardless of Taylor's success in meeting established standards. Taylor noticed the tension her evaluation was creating, but maintained focus on aircraft preparation rather than allowing external pressures to compromise her concentration. Her professional approach to the situation impressed personnel who had expected emotional responses to the mounting scrutiny. "Is there anything I should know about the political concerns?" Taylor asked Captain Hunter directly. "Nothing that affects today's evaluation standards. Your job is to demonstrate your capabilities safely. Everything else is administrative." The first engine start procedure commenced with Taylor in the front seat and Captain Hunter in the instructor position behind her. The 38's twin engines buckled up with characteristic whine that filled the cockpit with sound and vibration unlike anything Taylor had experienced in simulators. Her manipulation of controls was careful and deliberate, following procedures with precision that reflected months of theoretical preparation. The aircraft's responsiveness exceeded simulation fidelity, requiring adjustments to control inputs that demonstrated her adaptability to real-world conditions. "Taxi to the active runway," Captain Hunter instructed through the intercom system. "Maintain center line and observe all ground control instructions." The taxi procedure provided Taylor's first experience with controlling actual aircraft under real-world conditions. Ground handling characteristics differed significantly from simulator parameters, requiring constant attention to wind effects, surface conditions, and proximity to other aircraft. Lieutenant Boyd observed from the control tower, radio in hand to provide immediate intervention if necessary. His skepticism remained evident, though Taylor's competent aircraft handling was beginning to erode his certainty about edge-based limitations. "She's doing better than I expected," Boyd admitted to the tower controller. "Still think this is dangerous precedent, but she's not embarrassing herself." At the runway threshold, Captain Hunter made the crucial decision about whether Taylor was ready for actual flight operations. The assessment involved evaluating not only her demonstrated capabilities, but also her emotional state and judgment under pressure that no simulation could replicate. Taylor, are you ready for takeoff clearance? Yes, ma'am. All systems normal. Winds within parameters, runway clear. The professional response indicated that Taylor was processing multiple information sources while maintaining situational awareness necessary for safe flight operations. Her performance had consistently exceeded minimum standards, though real flight would test capabilities that ground operations couldn't evaluate. Tower Talon 77 requesting takeoff clearance for training flight. Talon 77 cleared for takeoff. Winds 270 at 8 knots. Taylor advanced the throttles with steady pressure, monitoring engine parameters while maintaining directional control as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. The sensation of actual flight differed dramatically from simulation, requiring constant adjustment to control inputs as the T-38 transitioned from ground effect to free flight. Positive rate, gear up, Captain Hunter called as the aircraft climbed away from Thunderbolt Air Force Base. Taylor's first actual flight had begun successfully, marking achievement that no 8-year-old in military history had ever accomplished. The political and legal complications waiting on the ground would soon test whether exceptional individual performance could overcome institutional resistance to unprecedented challenges. Below them, personnel watched the T-38 climb into the Nevada sky, knowing they were witnessing either the birth of legend or the prelude to catastrophe that would reshape military aviation training forever. At 8:0 feet above the Mojave Desert, Taylor Butler experienced pure flight for the first time in her life. The 38 Talon responded to her control inputs with precision that no simulator could replicate, banking smoothly through gentle turns as she learned to translate theoretical knowledge into three-dimensional reality. The aircraft's twin engines provided thrust that pressed her back into the ejection seat, while the canopy offered unobstructed views of Nevada's stark landscape stretching endlessly in all directions. Maintain heading 270 and begin descent to 6:0 Fort Captain Hunter instructed through the intercom, her voice calm despite the unprecedented nature of what they were accomplishing. Taylor adjusted the throttles and elevator trim with movements that were becoming more natural as she adapted to the aircraft's characteristics. Each control input produced immediate feedback that helped her understand the relationship between pilot intention and aircraft response. How does it feel compared to the simulator? Captain Hunter asked. More alive, Taylor replied, her voice carrying wonder despite her efforts to maintain professional composure. The simulator teaches you what to do, but this teaches you how it feels to do it right. The philosophical observation impressed Captain Hunter, who recognized that Taylor was processing the experience on levels that suggested genuine aptitude for aviation rather than simple mechanical skill acquisition. On the ground at Thunderbolt Air Force Base, a convoy of black vehicles approached the main gate with government license plates that indicated high-level political involvement. Representative Mark Williams had arrived with a full congressional staff and media relations team, transforming Taylor's evaluation from internal Air Force matter into public spectacle with national implications. Colonel Ford waited in his office, reviewing legal briefings that Colonel Boyd had prepared for the inevitable confrontation with congressional oversight. The documentation revealed complex liability issues and regulatory gray areas that could provide ammunition for critics seeking to terminate the evaluation regardless of Taylor's performance. Sir, Representative Williams is demanding immediate access to all evaluation records and wants to interview key personnel, his aide reported. He's also brought CNN and Fox News crews. Ford understood that media attention would fundamentally change the nature of Taylor's remaining evaluation days. Public scrutiny would create pressure that could compromise both her performance and the objectivity of her assessors. General Lane emerged from the communications center where she had been coordinating with Pentagon officials about the developing political situation. Her expression revealed the complex calculations involved in managing both institutional interests and individual fairness. Roger, I've been instructed to provide complete transparency to congressional oversight while maintaining operational security. That's going to be a challenging balance. At 6:0 feet, Taylor was executing basic flight maneuvers under Captain Hunter's guidance, demonstrating coordination and spatial awareness that exceeded expectations for someone with no previous flight experience. Her theoretical preparation had provided excellent foundation, but her natural feel for aircraft control was creating performance that impressed even skeptical observers monitoring from the ground. Execute a standard rate turn to heading 360, Captain Hunter instructed. Taylor rolled the aircraft into a coordinated turn, monitoring instruments while maintaining awareness of the horizon and terrain below. The maneuver was executed with precision that suggested hours of practice rather than first-time performance. Outstanding control technique, Captain Hunter observed. You're maintaining altitude and airspeed within very tight tolerances. The radio crackled with transmission from Thunderbolt Tower that would test Taylor's ability to handle unexpected complications while maintaining aircraft control. Talon 77, be advised, we have VIP arrival requiring immediate priority landing. Return to base and enter holding pattern at assigned altitude. The instruction required Taylor to navigate back to the airfield while managing air traffic considerations that added complexity to what had been routine training flight. Her response demonstrated growing confidence with radio procedures and flight planning. Thunderbolt Tower Talon 77 understands VIP priority, requesting vectors for holding pattern entry. Talon 77 turn heading 180, maintain 60. Expect further clearance in 10 minutes. As Taylor maneuvered the aircraft according to air traffic control instructions, the political drama unfolding below reached new levels of intensity. Representative Williams had convened an impromptu press conference outside the base administrative building, using Taylor's evaluation as platform for broader criticism of military spending priorities and institutional accountability. We have 8-year-old children being placed in fighter aircraft while our military struggles with budget constraints and personnel shortages, Williams declared to assembled reporters. This represents exactly the kind of misplaced priorities that demand congressional oversight. Colonel Ford watched the press conference from his office window, understanding that Taylor's remarkable performance was being overshadowed by political considerations that had nothing to do with her individual capabilities or the validity of merit-based evaluation. Dr. Ford approached with psychological assessment data that provided different perspective on the situation's complexity. Her analysis revealed that Taylor was thriving under pressure rather than being overwhelmed by it, suggesting emotional resilience that contradicted assumptions about children's vulnerability to stress. Her psychological profile shows exceptional stress management and adaptive response patterns. She's actually performing better under pressure than many adult candidates. The clinical assessment challenged political arguments about child endangerment while supporting institutional decisions to continue the evaluation based on demonstrated capability rather than chronological age. At altitude, Taylor was learning advanced flight techniques that would test her coordination and judgment simultaneously. Captain Hunter introduced formation flying concepts using another 38 that had launched to provide reference aircraft for training maneuvers. Talon 78 will be your lead aircraft. Maintain position approximately 50 feet behind and to the right. Focus on smooth control inputs and constant visual reference. The formation flying exercise required Taylor to divide attention between multiple aircraft while maintaining precise control of her own flight path. The complexity exceeded anything simulators had prepared her for, demanding situational awareness and multitasking abilities that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. Lieutenant Boyd observed from the wingman aircraft his radio communications revealing grudging respect for Taylor's developing capabilities despite his continued concerns about the precedent being established. She's maintaining better formation position than most student pilots achieve after weeks of training, Boyd reported to Captain Hunter. The professional assessment from a previously skeptical observer carried significant weight in validating Taylor's performance, though political pressure was making continued evaluation increasingly difficult regardless of her demonstrated competency. He and on the ground, Representative Williams was touring facilities with General Lane, asking pointed questions about safety procedures and institutional decision-making processes. His inquiries revealed sophisticated understanding of military operations combined with predetermined conclusions about the inappropriateness of Taylor's participation. General, regardless of this child's individual performance, don't you believe we're establishing dangerous precedents that could pressure other military families into inappropriate situations? General Lane's response was diplomatically precise while defending institutional flexibility and merit-based assessment principles. Representative Williams, the Air Force has always evaluated individuals based on demonstrated capability rather than demographic assumptions. Ms. Butler's case represents application of existing evaluation procedures rather than creation of new standards. The philosophical debate about individual versus institutional considerations continued as Taylor executed increasingly complex maneuvers at altitude, her performance consistently exceeding expectations while political pressure mounted for termination of her evaluation. A radio transmission from Thunderbolt Tower introduced complications that would test everyone's decision-making under pressure. Talon 77, we have developing weather system approaching from the west. Recommend immediate return to base for landing. Taylor looked toward the western horizon, noting cloud formations that suggested thunderstorm development. The weather situation required immediate assessment of options and decisive action that would test her judgment under genuine pressure. Captain Hunter, I can see the weather system. What's our fuel state and landing options? The question demonstrated situational awareness and resource management thinking that impressed Captain Hunter, who noted that Taylor was asking appropriate questions rather than simply waiting for instructions. We have sufficient fuel for immediate return or diversion to alternate airfield. The decision depends on weather development rate and runway conditions. Taylor studied the approaching weather while monitoring aircraft systems and maintaining formation position with the lead aircraft. The multitasking requirements were testing capabilities that no classroom preparation could have developed. I recommend immediate return to Thunderbolt. The weather looks like it's moving faster than forecasted. And I'm familiar with the runway configuration there. The decision reflected good judgment and conservative risk assessment that impressed the observing personnel. Taylor was demonstrating pilot thinking rather than simply following instructions. As the formation of T-38s turned toward Thunderbolt Air Force Base, neither Taylor nor the personnel supporting her evaluation could have anticipated the political firestorm that would greet their return. Representative Williams had scheduled additional press conferences and was demanding immediate termination of what he characterized as, quote, dangerous experimentation with children's lives. The weather system was also developing faster than meteorological forecasts had predicted, creating genuine urgency that would test Taylor's ability to execute precision approaches under deteriorating conditions. Her first flight was about to become her first genuine emergency, with political and meteorological pressures converging to create the most challenging test of her capabilities yet encountered. Thunderbolt Tower Talon 77 flight requesting immediate approach clearance due to weather conditions. Talon 77 cleared for straight and approach runway 27, winds 280 at 15 gusting to 25 knots. The wind conditions were approaching the limits for safe training operations, especially for inexperienced pilots. Taylor would need to demonstrate precision flying under conditions that challenged even experienced aviators, while knowing that political pressure was mounting to end her evaluation regardless of her performance. "Taylor, are you ready for a challenging approach?" Captain Hunter asked. "Yes, ma'am. I've studied crosswind landing techniques extensively, and the winds are still within aircraft limitations." The confident response reflected preparation and judgment that exceeded her chronological age. Though the approaching test would determine whether theoretical knowledge could translate into successful performance under genuine pressure, below them, the convergence of political opposition and meteorological challenge was creating perfect storm that would determine not only Taylor's future, but potentially the Air Force's willingness to recognize exceptional potential regardless of conventional limitations. On the next few minutes would prove whether an 8-year-old girl could execute precision flying under conditions that demanded everything her training and natural ability could provide. The T-38 Talon descended through increasingly turbulent air as Taylor lined up for what would become the most scrutinized landing in Air Force history. Below on the tarmac, television crews positioned themselves behind safety barriers while Representative Williams gestured emphatically to reporters, his words lost in the howling desert wind that was gusting across Thunderbolt's runway at 28 knots with stronger surges. Talon 77, winds now 3,000 at 22, gusting 35. You're cleared to land runway 27 or request vectors for alternate airfield. The tower controller transmitted his voice carrying professional concern about the deteriorating conditions. Taylor felt the aircraft buck and yaw as wind sugar tested her control inputs. Requiring constant corrections to maintain approach path stability, her small hands gripped the control stick with determination while her feet worked the rudder pedals to counter the crosswind's tendency to push the aircraft sideways. "I can handle this approach," Taylor told Captain Hunter through the intercom, her voice steady despite the challenging conditions. "The aircraft is responding normally to control inputs." Captain Hunter monitored Taylor's technique while maintaining readiness to take control if the situation exceeded safe parameters. The crosswind landing would test coordination skills that even experienced pilots found demanding, requiring precise timing and confident execution under pressure that no simulation could replicate. On the ground, Chief Hunter stood in the control tower, watching the approach with binoculars, his expression revealing the tension that everyone felt about Taylor's first encounter with genuinely hazardous flying conditions. Beside him, General Lane spoke quietly into a secure phone, providing real-time updates to Pentagon officials who were monitoring the situation's political implications. "The aircraft is maintaining stable approach angle despite gusty conditions," Chief Hunter reported to the assembled observers. "She's demonstrating excellent crosswind technique for someone with no previous experience." Representative Williams positioned himself where television cameras could capture both his commentary and the approaching aircraft, creating visual narrative that would reinforce his arguments about inappropriate risk-taking with children's safety. "This exemplifies exactly what's wrong with military priorities," Williams declared to CNN's correspondent. "We have an 8-year-old child attempting to land a fighter jet in dangerous weather conditions. While congressional oversight is being ignored, the political theater was unfolding as Taylor concentrated on the most demanding flying she had ever attempted. The runway appeared to drift left and right in her windscreen as gusts tested her ability to maintain center line alignment while managing descent rate and airspeed simultaneously. 50 ft above minimums, Quote, Captain Hunter called, providing altitude reference as Taylor entered the critical phase of the approach where any error could result in catastrophic consequences. Taylor's control inputs became more aggressive as ground effect altered the aircraft's handling characteristics, requiring immediate adjustments to maintain control as the 38 transitioned from free flight to ground proximity. Her technique demonstrated understanding of aerodynamic principles that exceeded her chronological age by several years. 24 looking good, Captain Hunter continued, her voice carrying encouragement despite the tension everyone felt about the challenging conditions. The 38's main landing gear touched down slightly right of center line as a wind gust tested Taylor's directional control at the critical moment of touchdown. Her immediate rudder input and throttle management kept the aircraft tracking down the runway despite conditions that would have challenged much more experienced pilots. Outstanding landing, Captain Hunter announced as the aircraft rolled out safely. That was textbook crosswind technique under genuinely difficult conditions. The successful landing created immediate reactions across multiple audiences watching the event unfold. In the control tower, base personnel erupted in spontaneous applause that reflected their relief and admiration for Taylor's performance under pressure. On the tarmac, television crews captured footage that would soon be broadcast nationwide. Though editorial interpretation would vary dramatically depending on political perspective, Representative Williams found his prepared criticism somewhat deflated by the obvious competency Taylor had demonstrated, though he quickly refocused his arguments on broader policy implications rather than individual performance. Regardless of today's outcome, this situation represents institutional failure to maintain appropriate safety standards and congressional oversight. Williams told Fox News cameras, military commanders should not be making unilateral decisions about experimental programs involving children. Colonel Ford emerged from the administrative building to meet the returning aircraft, his expression reflecting complex emotions about an achievement that exceeded his expectations while creating political complications he had never anticipated. The successful flight validated his decision to support Taylor's evaluation, but congressional pressure threatened to overshadow her remarkable performance. As Taylor climbed down from the 38 cockpit, her legs slightly unsteady from adrenaline and excitement, she found herself facing a crowd of personnel whose expressions ranged from admiration to concern about the media circus that had developed around her evaluation. Dr. Ford approached immediately to conduct post-flight psychological assessment, her questions designed to evaluate Taylor's emotional state after her first encounter with genuinely challenging flying conditions. "How are you feeling about the approach and landing?" Dr. Ford asked. "Excited and a little tired," Taylor replied honestly. "The crosswind was harder than I expected, but the aircraft did exactly what I asked it to do. I understand now why Dad loved flying so much." The mature reflection on her experience impressed Dr. Ford, who noted that Taylor was processing the achievement in healthy ways rather than being overwhelmed by the attention or pressure surrounding her performance. General Lane approached the group gathered around Taylor, her expression revealing the complex political calculations involved in managing congressional pressure while maintaining institutional support for merit-based evaluation. "Miss Butler, that was remarkable flying under challenging conditions. You've demonstrated capabilities that exceed my expectations and validate the decision to provide this evaluation opportunity." The endorsement from a Pentagon-level official carried significant weight, though General Lane understood that political considerations might override performance-based assessments if congressional pressure continued to escalate. Representative Williams approached the group with television crews in tow, his presence immediately changing the dynamic from post-flight celebration to political confrontation. Taylor noticed the shift in atmosphere, but maintained the professional composure that had characterized her throughout the evaluation process. "General Lane, I want to speak directly with this child about her understanding of the risks she's been exposed to," Williams announced, his tone suggesting predetermined conclusions about Taylor's exploitation rather than genuine concern for her welfare. "Representative Williams, Miss Butler has demonstrated exceptional capability and maturity throughout this evaluation. Her performance today exceeded standards that many adult pilots struggle to achieve. That's irrelevant to the question of appropriate institutional oversight in child protection," Williams countered. "Military commanders don't have authority to experiment with children's safety regardless of individual performance." Taylor listened to the adults debate her situation while processing her own feelings about the flight she had just completed. The crosswind landing had been genuinely challenging, but her successful execution had provided confidence that her preparation and natural abilities were adequate for advanced aviation training. "Excuse me," Taylor interjected politely, causing the political debate to pause as attention focused on her. "Representative Williams, I understand your concerns about safety, but I want you to know that I requested this opportunity and prepared extensively for it. Nobody forced me to attempt something I wasn't ready for." The articulate response surprised Williams, who had expected to find evidence of manipulation or coercion rather than a composed child who clearly understood her own motivations and capabilities. Young lady, you're too young to fully understand the risks involved in what you're attempting. Adults have responsibility to protect children from dangerous situations regardless of the children's wishes. With respect, sir, my father died serving his country because he believed some risks were worth taking for important purposes. I'm not being reckless. I'm honoring his memory by proving that his training was good enough to prepare me for this challenge. The reference to her father's sacrifice created a moment of silence that temporarily suspended the political debate. As everyone present processed the emotional depth of Taylor's motivation for pursuing advanced aviation training, Captain Hunter stepped forward to address the practical implications of continued political pressure on Taylor's remaining evaluation schedule. Representative Williams, Miss Butler has 3 more days of scheduled assessment activities. Her performance today demonstrates that she can handle progressively more challenging requirements safely. I am recommending immediate termination of this experiment, Williams replied. Congressional oversight takes precedence over local command decisions, especially when child welfare is involved. The political ultimatum threatened to end Taylor's evaluation regardless of her demonstrated capabilities, creating exactly the kind of institutional inflexibility that her success had been designed to challenge. Colonel Ford approached the group, his expression revealing the difficult position he faced between supporting exceptional individual performance and managing congressional pressure that could affect his entire command. Representative Williams, I understand your concerns, but Miss Butler has earned the right to complete her evaluation based on demonstrated competency. Terminating the program now would ignore evidence in favor of predetermined policy assumptions. Colonel, you don't have authority to continue experimental programs that violate federal safety guidelines and congressional oversight requirements. The confrontation was escalating toward institutional crisis that would force resolution based on political power rather than individual merit or performance-based assessment. General Lane intervened with the diplomatic skill that had characterized her career in managing complex military-civilian relationships. Representative Williams, I suggest we convene a formal review session where you can examine all safety protocols, evaluation criteria, and performance documentation before making final recommendations to congressional leadership. The proposal provided face-saving compromise that might allow Taylor to continue her evaluation while addressing legitimate oversight concerns through proper channels. Taylor watched the adults negotiate her future while reflecting on the flight she had just completed successfully under conditions that had challenged her capabilities to their limits. The crosswind landing had proven that her preparation and natural abilities were adequate for genuine aviation challenges. But political considerations threatened to override performance-based conclusions. As the day's dramatic events concluded with unresolved tension between individual achievement and institutional oversight, Taylor understood that her remaining evaluation days would occur under even greater scrutiny. The successful flight had validated her capabilities, while intensifying political pressure that could terminate her opportunity regardless of continued exceptional performance. The next phase of her unprecedented challenge would test whether institutional courage could withstand congressional pressure when faced with evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about age, capability, and the nature of military excellence. Wednesday dawned with unusual stillness across Thunderbolt Air Force Base, as if the desert itself was holding its breath before the formal review session that would determine Taylor Butler's fate. The conference room in Building 1200 had been transformed into something resembling a court-martial hearing with formal seating arrangements, recording equipment, and legal advisors representing multiple competing interests. Representative Williams sat at the head of the table flanked by congressional staff and child welfare advocates who had arrived overnight to support his position. Across from them, General Lane presided over Air Force personnel including Colonel Ford, Captain Hunter, and Dr. Ford, each armed with documentation supporting Taylor's continued evaluation. At the center of attention sat Taylor herself, wearing her most formal civilian clothes and maintaining the composed bearing that had impressed everyone throughout her unprecedented week. The morning's first revelation came from an unexpected source. Blake Ford, Colonel Ford's 14-year-old son and a participant in the Standard Youth Aviation Program, had requested permission to address the review board about Taylor's impact on other military dependents. Ma'am, I've been in the youth program for 2 years. Blake began addressing General Lane with military formality his father had instilled. Taylor's participation hasn't made the program easier or compromised our standards. If anything, she's made all of us work harder because she set such a high example. The testimony from a peer participant carried weight that adult assessments couldn't provide, offering perspective on Taylor's integration with age-appropriate military community rather than isolated exceptional case. Representative Williams shifted uncomfortably at this unexpected support, having prepared arguments based on assumptions about negative peer impacts rather than positive leadership influence. Son, regardless of individual performance, institutional policies exist to protect all children, not just exceptional ones. Williams responded, special exceptions create pressure on other families to push their children beyond appropriate limits. Blake's response demonstrated maturity that surprised the assembled adults while reinforcing arguments about individual assessment rather than blanket age restrictions. Sir, with respect, Taylor didn't get special treatment. She earned her opportunity by meeting the same standards we all have to meet. That's not pressure, that's inspiration, Dr. Ford presented comprehensive psychological evaluation data that contradicted assumptions about stress and developmental concerns that had driven much of the political opposition to Taylor's evaluation. Ms. Butler's psychological profile shows exceptional emotional resilience, healthy stress management, and positive adaptive responses to challenging situations, Dr. Ford explained, rather than being harmed by this experience. She's demonstrating growth patterns that suggest significant benefit from age-appropriate challenges. The clinical assessment challenged fundamental assumptions about children's vulnerability to pressure while supporting institutional decisions based on individual readiness rather than demographic generalizations. Captain Hunter presented flight performance data that documented Taylor's consistent improvement and safety record throughout the evaluation period. The technical analysis revealed capabilities that exceeded established benchmarks for teenage participants while maintaining superior safety margins. Ms. Butler has completed 47 flight maneuvers with 0 safety violations and performance ratings that place her in the 95th percentile of all program participants regardless of age. Captain Hunter reported, Representative Williams reviewed the documentation with obvious reluctance to accept evidence that contradicted his predetermined conclusions about the inappropriateness of Taylor's participation. Captain, exceptional individual performance doesn't justify institutional policy changes that could endanger other children. Williams argued, military commanders must consider broader implications beyond single cases. The philosophical debate about individual versus institutional considerations was interrupted by urgent communication from the flight line. Chief Hunter's voice crackled through the conference room speakers with news that would transform the day's proceedings from administrative review to genuine emergency response. Colonel Ford, we have aircraft malfunction on the active runway. Talon 74 has hydraulic failure and cannot retract landing gear. Pilot is requesting immediate assistance. The emergency created real-world test of personnel and procedures that would demonstrate everyone's capabilities under pressure that no planned evaluation could simulate. Lieutenant Boyd was piloting the malfunctioned aircraft, his voice tight with controlled stress as he communicated with tower personnel about his deteriorating situation. Thunderbolt Tower Talon 74 declaring emergency. Primary hydraulic system failure, backup system showing pressure loss. Request immediate vectors to emergency landing area. Colonel Ford stood to coordinate emergency response while Taylor listened intently to radio communications that were providing education and crisis management that no classroom could offer. Taylor, this is real-world emergency response, General Lane observed. Observe how trained personnel handle unexpected situations. The emergency was escalating as Lieutenant Boyd reported additional system failures that transformed routine hydraulic problem into potential catastrophic situation requiring immediate decision-making under pressure. Tower, I'm losing flight control effectiveness, need emergency landing clearance and crash rescue standing by. Taylor's response surprised everyone in the conference room. Instead of remaining passively observant, she began analyzing the situation using technical knowledge her father had taught her about 38 systems and emergency procedures. The backup hydraulic system has manual reversion capability, Taylor said quietly to Captain Hunter. If Lieutenant Boyd configures the system properly, he should be able to maintain control for emergency landing. Captain Hunter's eyebrows rose at Taylor's accurate technical assessment of a complex emergency situation that was unfolding in real time. How do you know about manual reversion procedures? Captain Hunter asked. Dad taught me about backup systems because he said pilots need to understand every way to keep flying when primary systems fail. The knowledge demonstration under genuine emergency conditions provided more compelling evidence of Taylor's readiness than any planned evaluation could have offered. General Lane made immediate decision that would test both Taylor's capabilities and the institutional courage to recognize exceptional potential under pressure. Taylor, Lieutenant Boyd is having difficulty accessing manual reversion procedures while managing the emergency. Would you be willing to provide technical assistance through radio communication? The request was unprecedented, asking an 8-year-old to provide emergency technical support to a pilot in distress. But Taylor's demonstrated knowledge and composure under pressure made her potentially valuable resource in life-threatening situation. Yes, ma'am, I can help him configure the system for manual control. Representative Williams started to object, but General Lane silenced him with gesture that indicated military emergency took precedence over political considerations. Taylor accepted the radio handset with steady hands, her voice calm and professional as she established communication with Lieutenant Boyd. Talon 74, this is Taylor Butler with Emergency Technical Assistance. Can you access the manual reversion lever located behind your right knee? Boyd's response revealed surprise at receiving technical guidance from an 8-year-old, but his desperate situation made him willing to accept help from any knowledgeable source. Negative, I can't reach the lever while maintaining aircraft control. Can you talk me through alternative procedures? Taylor's response demonstrated systematic thinking under pressure that impressed everyone monitoring the emergency communication. Sir, you can activate manual reversion through the backup system panel. Switch number 4 should engage manual hydraulics if you cycle it off and back on while pulling the emergency backup handle. The technical guidance was accurate and clearly communicated despite the high-stress situation that was testing everyone's capabilities simultaneously. Boyd executed Taylor's instructions with immediate positive results that potentially saved his life and the aircraft. That worked. I'm regaining control authority. Manual reversion is engaged and systems are responding normally. The successful emergency resolution through Taylor's technical assistance created powerful demonstration of her value as knowledgeable team member rather than liability requiring protection. Colonel Ford coordinated ground emergency response while monitoring Boyd's approach for emergency landing that Taylor's guidance had made possible. Outstanding technical knowledge under pressure, General Lane observed to the assembled review board. Miss Butler just provided critical assistance that prevented potential catastrophic situation. Representative Williams found his arguments about child endangerment undermined by Taylor's demonstration of genuine value during real emergency that had threatened pilot safety. This is exactly what concerns me, Williams protested weakly. Children shouldn't be placed in situations where they're providing emergency technical support. Taylor's response was delivered with composure that demonstrated emotional maturity far beyond her chronological age. Sir, I was never in danger. I was helping someone who needed technical knowledge that I happened to have. That's what military people do. We help each other when situations require it. The practical philosophy impressed everyone present while highlighting the fundamental question about whether capability should be limited by age or developed based on demonstrated competency. Lieutenant Boyd's successful emergency landing concluded the crisis that had temporarily suspended political debate in favor of practical emergency response. His first words after touchdown were directed toward Taylor through radio communication that everyone in the conference room heard clearly. Taylor, that was exceptional technical assistance. You probably saved my life and definitely saved the aircraft. Thank you. The professional acknowledgement from a previously skeptical pilot carried enormous weight in validating Taylor's readiness for advanced responsibilities despite her age. Dr. Ford noted Taylor's emotional response to the successful emergency resolution, documenting healthy stress processing and appropriate satisfaction with meaningful contribution rather than problematic excitement about dangerous situations. General Lane recognized that the morning's events had fundamentally changed the nature of the review proceedings. Taylor had demonstrated value under genuine emergency conditions that no planned evaluation could have replicated. Representative Williams, Miss Butler has just provided compelling evidence that exceptional individual readiness can contribute to mission success and personnel safety. Her technical knowledge and composure under pressure exceeded that of many adult personnel. The emergency had created perfect demonstration of Taylor's argument that capability should determine opportunity rather than demographic assumptions limiting potential contribution. Representative Williams faced the impossible task of arguing against evidence that Taylor's participation had contributed to successful resolution of genuine emergency that could have resulted in pilot death without her technical assistance. This incident, while impressive, doesn't address broader policy implications of military programs involving children, Williams maintained, though his arguments carried less conviction after witnessing Taylor's practical value under pressure. The formal review session would continue, but the morning's emergency had shifted momentum decisively toward recognizing Taylor's exceptional readiness rather than limiting her opportunities based on conventional age restrictions. Her remaining evaluation days would proceed under continued scrutiny, but with growing institutional confidence that exceptional potential deserved development regardless of the demographic categories that had traditionally defined program participation. The afternoon session of the formal review reconvened with dramatically altered dynamics following Taylor's heroic assistance during Lieutenant Boyd's emergency. Representative Williams found himself defending increasingly untenable positions while facing documented evidence of Taylor's practical value under genuine crisis conditions. The assembled observers had witnessed an 8-year-old provide technical expertise that prevented potential catastrophic aircraft loss and pilot injury. Lieutenant Boyd himself requested permission to address the review board, his flight suit still bearing evidence of the hydraulic fluid leak that had created his emergency situation. His testimony would carry unique credibility as someone who had initially opposed Taylor's evaluation but had directly benefited from her technical knowledge under pressure. General Lane, Representative Williams, I want to state for the record that Taylor Butler's assistance was instrumental in resolving my emergency situation. Boyd began, his voice carrying conviction that reflected recent life-threatening experience. Her technical knowledge and communication skills under pressure exceeded those of many qualified personnel I've worked with. The professional endorsement from a previously skeptical pilot undermined remaining arguments about Taylor's readiness while demonstrating practical value that transcended edge-based limitations. Representative Williams struggled to maintain his position in the face of mounting evidence that contradicted his assumptions about child endangerment and institutional recklessness. Lieutenant, while I appreciate your gratitude, single incidents don't justify systemic policy changes that could endanger other military children, Williams argued. Though his conviction was clearly wavering, Taylor had remained quietly attentive throughout the political debate, but she requested permission to address the fundamental questions that had driven the entire evaluation process. May I explain why this opportunity means so much to me? Taylor asked General Lane. Please proceed, Miss Butler. Taylor stood with the military bearing that had characterized her throughout the week. Her words carefully chosen to address both emotional motivations and practical considerations that had shaped her unprecedented request. When my father died, I felt like I had lost the most important connection to understanding what his service meant. Flying isn't just about operating aircraft. It's about carrying forward the values and skills that made him exceptional at his job. This evaluation has taught me that I can honor his memory through excellence rather than just grief. The articulate explanation of her motivations impressed everyone present, while highlighting the therapeutic value of appropriate challenges for military children processing loss and seeking meaningful connection to family legacy. Dr. Ford noted Taylor's emotional processing during this statement, documenting healthy integration of grief with purposeful action rather than avoidance or unhealthy coping mechanisms. General Lane recognized that Taylor's explanation addressed philosophical questions about military family culture and the transmission of values across generations that extended beyond simple policy considerations. Miss Butler, your father would be proud of what you've accomplished this week. You've demonstrated that his training and values created exceptional preparation for advanced challenges. The conversation was interrupted by communication from the Pentagon that would reshape the entire scope of Taylor's evaluation. General Lane's aide delivered a message that captured everyone's attention with its implications for institutional policy and individual opportunity. General, the Chief of Staff wants to speak with you immediately. There's been significant interest at the highest levels about Miss Butler's performance and its implications for military training policies. The Pentagon involvement indicated that Taylor's case had attracted attention far beyond Thunderbolt Air Force Base, potentially influencing survey-wide approaches to exceptional circumstances and merit-based evaluation procedures. General Lane accepted the secure communication while the review board waited in tense silence. Her expression during the conversation revealed complex information that would significantly impact the proceedings. I've been authorized to offer Miss Butler an unprecedented opportunity, General Lane announced upon completing her call. If she successfully completes her remaining evaluation requirements, she would be invited to participate in a special Pentagon program for exceptionally gifted military dependents. The announcement transformed Taylor's local evaluation into a potential pathway toward national recognition and advanced development opportunities that had never been available to someone her age. Representative Williams found his opposition undermined by institutional support at the highest levels of military leadership, indicating that Taylor's case had already influenced policy considerations beyond his congressional authority. General, I must protest this escalation of an experiment that should be terminated rather than expanded, Williams stated, though his influence was clearly diminishing. Representative, the Pentagon has reviewed all documentation and determined that Ms. Butler's case represents exactly the kind of exceptional potential that military institutions should identify and develop. General Lane replied with finality that indicated political debate was concluded. The focus shifted to Taylor's remaining evaluation requirements, which would now carry additional significance as demonstration of readiness for national-level opportunities rather than simple local accommodation. Captain Hunter presented the final assessment schedule that would test Taylor's most advanced capabilities while maintaining safety standards appropriate for her age and experience level. Tomorrow's evaluation will include aerobatic maneuvers, instrument flight procedures, and emergency response scenarios that represent the highest level of training available in our program, Captain Hunter explained. The advanced curriculum would challenge Taylor's developing skills while providing definitive assessment of her readiness for the exceptional opportunities that had emerged from her remarkable week of performance. Taylor's response demonstrated the confident humility that had characterized her approach throughout the evaluation process. I'm ready for whatever challenges you think are appropriate. I want to prove that I can handle the most demanding requirements safely. Chief Hunter approached with technical information about aircraft modifications that would be necessary for tomorrow's advanced training. His expertise crucial for ensuring Taylor's safety during the most challenging flying she would attempt. We've prepared a specially configured 38 with enhanced safety systems and telemetry equipment that will monitor every aspect of performance. Chief Hunter reported, the aircraft is essentially a flying laboratory that will document capabilities and safety margins throughout all maneuvers. The technological sophistication of tomorrow's evaluation reflected institutional commitment to objective assessment while maintaining unprecedented safety standards for someone Taylor's age. Dr. Ford presented psychological readiness assessment that would determine Taylor's emotional preparation for the increased pressure and complexity of final evaluation requirements. Taylor shows exceptional stress resilience and positive anticipation rather than anxiety about tomorrow's challenges. Dr. Ford reported her psychological profile suggests she's ready for advanced testing. As the formal review session concluded, Taylor found herself surrounded by personnel whose initial skepticism had transformed into professional respect and institutional support for her continued development. Colonel Ford approached with expression that reflected complex emotions about an experiment that had exceeded his wildest expectations while creating pressures he had never anticipated. Taylor, when you first requested this opportunity, I thought I was teaching you about limitations. Instead, you've taught all of us about the danger of accepting limitations without testing them. The philosophical observation captured the fundamental transformation that had occurred throughout Taylor's evaluation week, challenging institutional assumptions while demonstrating exceptional individual potential. Representative Williams prepared to depart with diminished influence and arguments that had been systematically undermined by Taylor's consistent performance under increasingly demanding conditions. I hope this situation doesn't establish precedents that pressure other families into inappropriate situations, Williams stated as his final position. Taylor's response demonstrated the wisdom that had impressed everyone throughout her unprecedented week. Sir, I hope it establishes precedents that give other people the chance to prove what they're capable of achieving when given appropriate opportunities. The exchange encapsulated the fundamental philosophical difference between protective limitation and developmental opportunity that had driven the entire evaluation process. As afternoon faded into evening, Taylor prepared for what would be her most challenging day yet. With aerobatic maneuvers and advanced procedures that would test every skill she had developed throughout her remarkable week of training. The Pentagon's interest had transformed her local evaluation into potential model for national policy regarding exceptional military dependence, creating pressure and opportunity that would influence not only her future, but potentially the futures of countless other exceptional young people. Blake Ford approached Taylor as personnel dispersed from the review session, his expression reflecting admiration from someone who had witnessed her growth throughout the week. You've changed everything here, Blake observed. Before you came, we all thought the program had fixed limits. Now we know the limits are just starting points. The peer recognition meant as much to Taylor as adult approval, confirming that her achievement had inspired rather than intimidated other young people in similar circumstances. Valerie Butler waited outside the conference room, her expression reflecting complex emotions about her daughter's transformation from grieving child to nationally recognized aviation prodigy in the span of one remarkable week. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Valerie asked as they walked toward their car. Excited and grateful, Taylor replied honestly. Dad's training got me this far, but tomorrow I'll find out if I can really fly the way he did. The conversation reflected Taylor's understanding that her final evaluation would test not only technical skills, but also the intangible qualities that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. Tomorrow would determine whether an 8-year-old girl could execute advanced aerobatic maneuvers that challenged experienced pilots while maintaining the safety standards and professional judgment that military aviation demanded. The stage was set for a climactic demonstration that would either validate the most unprecedented experiment in Air Force history or serve as cautionary tale about the limits of human potential regardless of exceptional preparation and institutional support. Thursday's pre-dawn hours brought crystalline desert air and perfect flying conditions that seemed designed for the most demanding aviation evaluation in military history. Taylor arrived at Hangar 7 to find unprecedented activity. Pentagon officials, Air Force Academy representatives, and advanced telemetry technicians had transformed the facility into Mission Control Center for what would either crown her remarkable week or demonstrate the ultimate limits of exceptional preparation. The specially modified 38 Talon gleamed under hangar lights, its surface bristling with sensors and monitoring equipment that would record every aspect of the day's advanced maneuvers. Chief Hunter supervised final systems checks with meticulous attention that reflected the extraordinary nature of what an 8-year-old was about to attempt. Every control input, every physiological response, every performance parameter will be monitored and recorded, Chief Hunter explained to the assembled officials. This aircraft is essentially a flying research laboratory designed to document human capability under controlled conditions. General Lane stood beside a bank of monitoring equipment that would provide real-time assessment of Taylor's performance during aerobatic maneuvers that challenged experienced test pilots. The Pentagon's investment in documentation technology demonstrated institutional commitment to understanding rather than simply observing exceptional potential. Dr. Ford conducted final psychological evaluation while Taylor completed equipment checks, her assessment crucial for determining emotional readiness for the most demanding flying she would ever attempt. "How are you feeling about today's challenges?" Dr. Ford asked. "Ready," Taylor replied with quiet confidence. "I've dreamed about aerobatic flying since I was 5 years old. Today I get to find out if dreams and preparation are enough." The philosophical response revealed mature understanding of the relationship between aspiration and achievement that impressed everyone within earshot. Captain Hunter approached with flight plans that outlined the day's progression from basic aerobatic maneuvers to advanced procedures that would test every skill Taylor had developed throughout her unprecedented week. "We'll begin with simple loops and rolls, then progress to more complex maneuvers based on your performance and comfort level," Captain Hunter explained. "At any point, if you're uncomfortable or I assess that safety margins are being approached, we'll terminate the advanced flying." Taylor studied the flight plan with systematic attention that had characterized her approach throughout the evaluation process, asking technical questions that demonstrated understanding of aerodynamic principles involved in each maneuver. The barrel roll requires coordinated aileron and rudder inputs while maintaining positive G-force throughout the maneuver. Taylor observed the key is smooth control pressure rather than abrupt movements. Captain Hunter's eyebrows rose at the accurate technical analysis from someone who had never performed aerobatic maneuvers in actual aircraft. "Where did you learn about G-force management during aerobatic flight?" Dad's technical manuals included sections on aerobatic procedures. "I've been studying the physics and control techniques for months." The revelation that Taylor had prepared specifically for advanced flying demonstrated planning depth that exceeded what anyone had assumed about her goals and expectations. As morning sunlight painted the Nevada mountains orange, Taylor completed pre-flight inspection of the most sophisticated training aircraft she had yet encountered. The modified 38's enhanced systems required additional checklist items that tested her ability to adapt established procedures to new equipment configurations. Lieutenant Boyd arrived to observe the evaluation that would test capabilities he had initially dismissed but now respected after Taylor's life-saving technical assistance during his emergency. His presence represented institutional acknowledgement that her readiness deserved serious assessment rather than patronizing accommodation. "Taylor, I'd owe you more than an apology," Boyd said as she completed her external inspection. "You saved my life yesterday, and you've taught me not to judge capability based on demographics." The professional recognition from a previously skeptical pilot carried emotional weight that validated Taylor's week-long effort to prove herself through performance rather than argument. Blake Ford appeared with other youth aviation program participants who had requested permission to observe the culmination of Taylor's remarkable evaluation. Their presence demonstrated peer support that transcended age differences and acknowledged exceptional achievement regardless of demographic categories. "We wanted to watch you make history," Blake explained. "You've shown all of us what's possible when preparation meets opportunity." The peer recognition meant as much to Taylor as adult approval, confirming that her achievement inspired rather than intimidated other young people pursuing their own aviation goals. Engine start procedures commenced with Taylor in the front seat and Captain Hunter in the instructor position, both wearing specially modified flight suits equipped with biometric monitoring that would provide physiological data throughout the aerobatic flight. The 38's twin engines sparkled up with familiar sound that had become comforting rather than intimidating over Taylor's week of training. Her control of startup procedures demonstrated growing familiarity with complex aircraft systems that had initially seemed overwhelming. Tower Talon 77 requesting taxi clearance for aerobatic training flight. Captain Hunter transmitted. Talon 77 taxi to runway 27 winds calm visibility unlimited. "Good luck today." The tower controller's informal encouragement reflected base-wide support for Taylor's final evaluation with personnel throughout Thunderbolt following her progress through radio communications and telemetry displays. Taxi procedures proceeded smoothly as Taylor demonstrated aircraft handling skills that had improved dramatically throughout her training week. Her control inputs were becoming intuitive rather than mechanical, suggesting natural feel for aviation that exceeded learned technique. At the runway threshold, Captain Hunter conducted final safety briefing that addressed the unique challenges of aerobatic flight and the specific procedures they would follow if emergency situations developed. Aerobatic maneuvers place unusual stresses on both aircraft and pilot. If you experience any discomfort, Disorientation or control difficulties, announce it immediately and I'll take control. Understood, I'll communicate any concerns immediately. Taylor's professional response reflected understanding of safety protocols while demonstrating confidence in her readiness for the advanced challenges ahead. Tower Talon 77, ready for takeoff. Talon 77 cleared for takeoff. Winds calm, have a great flight. The takeoff roll proceeded normally until the T-38 lifted off into Nevada's unlimited visibility, beginning what would become the most scrutinized aerobatic flight in Air Force history. Every control input would be recorded, every physiological response monitored, every performance parameter documented for analysis by Pentagon officials evaluating the limits of human potential. Climb to 80 feet and proceed to the aerobatic practice area, Captain Hunter instructed as they gained altitude over the desert landscape. Taylor's handling of the climbing turn demonstrated coordination and spatial awareness that had developed remarkably throughout her week of training. Her ability to maintain specific altitudes and headings while managing radio communications showed multitasking capabilities essential for advanced flying. Aerobatic area reached all systems normal, ready to begin maneuvers, Taylor reported with professional composure despite the significance of what she was about to attempt. Execute your first loop, maintaining positive G throughout the maneuver. Remember to announce any discomfort immediately. Taylor took a deep breath and pulled the aircraft into her first aerobatic maneuver. The simple loop that would test her ability to maintain control while experiencing forces that no simulation could replicate. The initial four pressed her into the ejection seat as the aircraft climbed vertically, then inverted at the top of the loop before diving back toward level flight. Outstanding technique, Captain Hunter announced as they completed the maneuver. Perfect altitude maintenance and smooth control throughout. The successful loop provided confidence for progressively more challenging maneuvers that would test Taylor's developing skills under increasingly demanding conditions. Execute a barrel roll to the right, maintaining altitude throughout the maneuver. The barrel roll required coordinated use of all flight controls while managing varying forces that tested Taylor's spatial orientation and aircraft control simultaneously. Her execution was smooth and precise, demonstrating understanding of complex aerodynamic principles that exceeded her chronological age by several years. In the monitoring station below, Pentagon officials watched telemetry data that documented performance exceeding their expectations for someone with Taylor's limited experience. Her physiological responses remained within normal parameters, while her control inputs demonstrated growing confidence and natural aptitude. Remarkable adaptation to aerobatic flight, General Lane observed to the assembled officials. Her performance parameters matched those of much more experienced pilots. The morning's maneuvers progressed through increasingly complex aerobatic sequences that tested every aspect of Taylor's developing capabilities. Each successful maneuver built confidence while demonstrating exceptional potential that justified the institutional risks taken to provide her evaluation opportunity. Split-S maneuver beginning from inverted flight, Captain Hunter instructed, introducing the most challenging maneuver yet attempted. The split-S required Taylor to roll inverted, then pull through a half loop that would test her control coordination under negative force that many pilots found disorienting. Her execution was flawless, maintaining precise control throughout a maneuver that challenged experienced aviators. As the aerobatic evaluation continued, neither Taylor nor the personnel monitoring her performance could anticipate the emergency that would soon test her capabilities under conditions that no training could fully prepare her for. A radio transmission from Thunderbolt Tower introduced complications that would transform routine evaluation into genuine crisis, requiring immediate decision-making under pressure that would determine whether Taylor's exceptional preparation could handle real-world emergency conditions. Talon 77, be advised, we have medical emergency on base requiring immediate helicopter evacuation. Can you expedite return to base for priority landing? The request created time pressure that would test Taylor's ability to maintain performance standards while managing urgency that added stress to already demanding flying conditions. Tower Talon 77 understands priority return. We can be on deck in 8 minutes. Taylor's immediate response to emergency requests demonstrated priority assessment and resource management thinking that exceeded her age while showing understanding of military mission requirements. The emergency descent toward Thunderbolt would test her ability to execute precision flying under time pressure that challenged even experienced pilots, all providing final demonstration of whether exceptional preparation could overcome any obstacle when supported by institutional courage and individual determination. The medical emergency unfolding at Thunderbolt Air Force Base would test every skill Taylor had developed during her unprecedented week of training. Airman First Class Cody Lane had suffered severe injuries in a maintenance accident, and the helicopter ambulance required immediate runway access that could only be provided if Taylor could execute a precision emergency approach faster than standard procedures typically allowed. Talon 77 injured airman has internal bleeding and requires immediate helicopter evacuation. The tower controller transmitted his voice-carrying urgency that transformed routine training flight into life-or-death mission. We need runway clearance in 6 minutes maximum. Taylor's response demonstrated decision-making maturity that exceeded her chronological age while honoring the military values her father had instilled through years of patient instruction. Tower Talon 77 beginning emergency descent will be on deck in 5 minutes. The commitment to exceed the required timeline reflected confidence in her abilities, combined with understanding that fellow military personnel depended on her performance when human life was at stake. Captain Hunter monitored Taylor's emergency descent procedures while maintaining readiness to intervene if the situation exceeded safe parameters for someone with her limited experience. The descent profile Taylor selected demonstrated understanding of aircraft performance limitations while maximizing efficiency under time pressure. Excellent descent planning code, Captain Hunter observed as they rapidly lost altitude toward Thunderbolt's runway. You're managing time constraints without compromising safety margins. At the monitoring station, Pentagon officials watched telemetry data that documented Taylor's physiological responses during genuine emergency conditions. Her heart rate remained within acceptable parameters, while her control inputs showed precise coordination despite pressure that would challenge experienced pilots. General Lane spoke quietly into her secure phone, providing real-time updates to Air Force leadership about performance that was exceeding all expectations for emergency response capability. She's maintaining perfect flight parameters while executing emergency procedures that many adult pilots would find challenging, General Lane reported to the Pentagon. The emergency approach required Taylor to configure the aircraft for landing while managing radio communications, monitoring multiple instrument readings and calculating approach angles that would ensure safe touchdown within tight time constraints. Gear down, flaps configured, landing checklist complete, Taylor announced with professional composure that belied the pressure she was operating under. Outstanding checklist management under pressure, Captain Hunter replied, noting that Taylor was following procedures systematically despite time constraints that encouraged shortcuts. At 3 miles from the runway, a new complication emerged that would test Taylor's judgment under conditions that no training scenario could have anticipated. Crosswinds had developed as desert thermals created atmospheric instability that would challenge even experienced pilots attempting precision approaches. Talon 77 winds now 270 at 18 gusting 25 knots. Runway conditions remained suitable for landing. The wind information required Taylor to adjust her approach technique while maintaining the rapid descent profile necessary to meet time requirements for the medical evacuation. The dual challenges tested her ability to prioritize competing demands while maintaining safety standards. I can handle the crosswind correction, Taylor told Captain Hunter. The approach angle will compensate for wind drift while maintaining our timeline. The confident assessment demonstrated that Taylor was processing multiple variables simultaneously while maintaining situational awareness necessary for successful emergency response. Base personnel gathered along the flight line to observe the approach that would conclude Taylor's remarkable week of evaluation. Their presence reflected institutional recognition that they were witnessing either the culmination of exceptional achievement or the demonstration of ultimate human limitations regardless of preparation and determination. Chief Hunter stood in the control tower with binoculars, monitoring Taylor's approach while coordinating ground emergency response for both the medical evacuation and potential aircraft recovery if the landing encountered difficulties. Approach looks stable despite the crosswind conditions, Chief Hunter reported to Colonel Ford. She's maintaining interlane track and proper descent rate. The medical helicopter waited at the runway threshold, its crew monitoring radio communications about Taylor's progress while preparing for immediate takeoff once runway access was secured. Their patient survival depended on Taylor's ability to execute precision flying under pressure that veteran pilots would find demanding. Dr. Ford watched from the medical station, her attention divided between psychological assessment of Taylor's performance and preparation for treating any injuries that might result from challenging landing conditions. Her monitoring equipment showed stress responses within normal parameters despite extraordinary circumstances. Valerie Butler stood with other family members near the flight line, her expression reflecting complex emotions about her daughter's transformation from grieving child to military pilot executing emergency missions. The week's events had exceeded every expectation while creating opportunities that would influence Taylor's entire future. 2 miles final on glide path, winds manageable, Taylor reported as she entered the critical phase of approach where any error could result in catastrophic consequences. Her voice carried calm professionalism that impressed everyone monitoring the emergency response, demonstrating emotional control under pressure that military service required in crisis situations. The Tu-38 touched down precisely on center line despite crosswind conditions that had tested Taylor's control technique to its limits. Her immediate application of wheel brakes and aerodynamic braking brought the aircraft to rapid stop that cleared the runway within the timeline required for medical helicopter operations. Outstanding emergency approach and landing, Captain Hunter announced as they rolled clear of the active runway. That was textbook precision flying under genuinely challenging conditions. The medical helicopter lifted off immediately, carrying Airman Lane toward advanced trauma care that Taylor's rapid response had made possible. Her performance under genuine emergency conditions provided more compelling demonstration of readiness than any planned evaluation could have offered. As Taylor shut down the 38's engines and completed post-flight procedures, she was surrounded by personnel whose initial skepticism had transformed into professional respect and institutional commitment to developing exceptional potential wherever it appeared. General Lane approached with expression that reflected the complex implications of what had just occurred. Taylor's emergency response had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded those of many experienced pilots while maintaining safety standards and judgment that exceeded her chronological age. Miss Butler, what you accomplished today represents the finest example of emergency airmanship I've witnessed in 35 years of military service. General Lane stated formally, you've proven that exceptional preparation combined with natural ability can overcome any limitation when serving purposes larger than individual achievement. The official recognition carried institutional weight that would influence Air Force policy regarding exceptional circumstances and merit-based evaluation for generations of future military dependents. Colonel Ford joined the group gathering around Taylor, his expression reflecting amazement at an experiment that had exceeded his wildest expectations while validating his decision to support individual excellence over conventional limitations. Taylor, when you first asked for this opportunity, I thought I was humoring a grieving child. Instead, you've taught all of us that our assumptions about human potential were limiting rather than protecting exceptional capability. The philosophical observation captured the fundamental transformation that had occurred throughout Taylor's unprecedented week of evaluation. Lieutenant Boyd approached with gratitude that reflected his personal experience of Taylor's life-saving technical assistance and his professional assessment of capabilities that had proven exceptional under multiple challenging conditions. Taylor, you saved 2 lives this week, mine through technical knowledge and Airman Lane's through exceptional flying. That's the kind of contribution that defines military excellence regardless of age or experience level. The acknowledgement from a previously skeptical pilot validated Taylor's argument that capability should determine opportunity rather than demographic assumptions limiting individual potential. Dr. Ford presented final psychological assessment data that documented Taylor's emotional processing of the week's achievements, revealing healthy integration of success with continued motivation for growth and learning. Taylor shows exceptional emotional resilience and positive adaptation to challenging experiences. This evaluation has contributed to her development rather than creating stress or unrealistic expectations. The clinical assessment supported institutional decisions while addressing concerns about potential psychological impacts of exceptional achievement at an early age. As afternoon sunlight painted the Nevada desert in golden hues, Taylor reflected on a week that had transformed her understanding of her own capabilities while honoring her father's memory through excellence that exceeded even her own expectations. Chief Hunter approached with documentation that would formalize Taylor's achievement and establish precedents for future exceptional circumstances evaluations. Taylor, you've completed every requirement of our most advanced training program while setting performance records that will challenge participants for years to come. Your father would be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. The reference to Master Sergeant Neil Butler's legacy brought tears to Taylor's eyes for the first time during her remarkable week as she processed the emotional significance of proving herself worthy of the military values he had instilled through patient instruction and personal example. Blake Ford represented the peer recognition that meant as much as adult approval, acknowledging that Taylor's achievement had inspired rather than intimidated other young people pursuing their own aviation goals. You've changed what all of us think is possible, Blake observed. Before this week, we accepted limitations we'd never questioned. Now we know they were just starting points. The institutional transformation Taylor had initiated would influence military training philosophy for generations, creating opportunities for exceptional potential that might otherwise be constrained by conventional assumptions about age and readiness. General Lane presented the official results of Taylor's evaluation with ceremony that reflected the historical significance of what had been accomplished during one unprecedented week at Thunderbolt Air Force Base. Miss Butler, you have successfully completed the most comprehensive aviation evaluation in Air Force history while setting performance standards that exceed those of participants with significantly more experience and training. You are hereby accepted into the Pentagon's Advanced Military Dependent Development Program with full institutional support for continued aviation education. The announcement represented achievement that no 8-year-old in military history had ever accomplished, creating pathways for advanced development that would prepare Taylor for eventual Air Force Academy admission and pilot training that had been her goal from the beginning. As base personnel applauded the conclusion of Taylor's remarkable evaluation, she understood that her week of proving herself had opened doors that could never be closed again. Not only for herself, but for countless future military children who possessed exceptional readiness, but might otherwise be limited by conventional timelines. "Thank you all for giving me the chance to prove what Dad's training could accomplish," Taylor said, her voice carrying gratitude that encompassed everyone who had supported her unprecedented challenge. "I hope I've honored his memory while showing that excellence recognizes no boundaries when preparation meets opportunity." The humble acknowledgement reflected character development that impressed everyone present while demonstrating that exceptional achievement had enhanced rather than compromised her fundamental values and perspective. Valerie Butler embraced her daughter as television crews documented the conclusion of a story that would inspire military families while demonstrating institutional courage to recognize potential wherever it appeared. "Your father's greatest achievement wasn't his own service record," Valerie whispered to Taylor. "It was raising a daughter who could exceed even his exceptional standards while maintaining the character that made him proud." As the sun set over Thunderbolt Air Force Base, Taylor Butler had not only achieved her impossible dream, but had fundamentally changed military aviation training while proving that sometimes the most profound breakthroughs come from the most unexpected sources when institutions have the courage to support individual excellence rather than limiting potential based on conventional assumptions. The 8-year-old girl, who had demanded an unprecedented opportunity, had become a military aviation legend whose achievement would inspire generations of future pilots to pursue excellence without accepting limitations that existed only in the minds of those who had never dared to test them. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.